Coming to you from deep inside the bowels of a great big empty. Get ready for another episode of The Home Defense Show with Skip Coryell.
And that was Golden Glenn, the official announcer of the Home Defense Show, and I'm your host, Skip Coryell, author of 22 books, Marine Corps veteran, founder of the Second Amendment March, proud father of 7, grandfather to 19 and counting, and as a special bonus, I'm also madly in love with my own wife. My priorities in life are God, family, and country, in that order, and I hereby promise to never compromise in my convictions. I may go broke, but I'll never go woke. And, of course, joining me today is my faithful and everlasting, ever-loving co-host and adoring wife, Sara Coryell. Sara, the other day, you told me that after 20-some years of living in Michigan, that you're starting to get used to the cold and the snow. Go ahead and tell the listeners where you grew up and what that was like.
I grew up on the west coast of Oregon, and it rained all the time. Like soft, like you're living in a cloud kind of rain. Not a pretty cloud, like gray and drippy. We had all kinds of words for rain. I don't know that I'm getting used to the cold precisely. It was such a novelty when I first got here and so amazing. And I still think it's beautiful, but I'm not as enamored with the cold as I perhaps was when I first got here.
Well, Sara, you're always telling me that your physical thermostat doesn't adjust very well, because we have a lot of temperature swings here in Michigan. Like today, it's almost 40 degrees, and in 2 days, it's going to be 5 degrees. And it's hard for you to adjust going up and down like that. Fall
is really hard on me. I'm just starting to get used to the heat, and then it goes away. In the winter, I'll just be starting to get used to the cold, and then it will start warming up, and then it just changes faster.
I think for me personally, I've been to the coast of Oregon where you grew up, and it's like most of the year it rains every single day, and you hardly see the sunshine. It's beautiful.
It's about 50 degrees year-round.
Yeah, about 50 degrees, but wet, makes me feel...
Not winter, year-round, like all of it.
A moss or a fungus or something.
My mother had come from Kansas, and she said her first couple summers in Newport, she had to wear her winter coat all summer because she couldn't adapt to the cold summers that we had.
All right. Well, Sara, why don't you go ahead and tell us what's on the show today?
All right. Well, today we're talking to John Riley, the lead instructor at Gentle Response, all about how to de-escalate verbal confrontations. Then, in the shootingclasses.com self-defense report, we'll be speaking with firearms instructor Rod Yoder about convenience store robberies by teenagers.
I think you're going to like John Riley from Gentle Response. You have a very gentle, mild personality, and he's into de-escalation, so... But before we get too far into the show, let's thank our sponsors, United States Concealed Carry Association, shootingclasses.com, and Centershot Indoor Gun Range. All right, Sara, you've got an article in the news. What's in the news today?
Well, Skip, today we have an article from Georgia. A Georgia homeowner finds herself in an unexpected legal predicament after confronting an alleged squatter on her property. Lolitha Hale, who owns a house in Livingston, Georgia, had been dealing with the squatter situation since August, according to her account to WSB-TV. Despite her attempts to resolve the issue, it was Hale who ended up in jail. Hale's troubles began when she discovered Sakumaya Johnson residing in her home with a former tenant. The tenant had previously been evicted, and Johnson initially received a citation for squatting. However, a court later ruled that Sakumaya Johnson is not a squatter, despite Hale's insistence that Johnson was never a tenant. On December 9, Hale entered her house to prepare it for a new renter and encountered Johnson once more. Hale claimed that Johnson had broken the locks to gain access. She stated, "She just caught up out of nowhere. She had this guy with her, and I locked the door. I locked the screen door, and he forced himself in, telling us to get out." Despite Hale's efforts to have Johnson charged with trespassing, it was Hale who was arrested. Police body cam footage captured an officer explaining to Hale that not everyone is as fortunate as she is, saying, "Everybody isn't as fortunate as you to have a bed." Johnson, on the other hand, maintained, "I was written a citation saying I was a squatter, but a judge signed an order saying that I wasn't a squatter." The police arrested Hale on charges of executing an illegal eviction and making terroristic threats, as she was heard saying, Leave before I get my gun. Hale expressed her disbelief at the situation, stating, "To see that woman walk into my mom's house while I was in the police car, something is wrong with this picture." She also questioned, "How can she not be squatting when I've never had any type of contract relationship with this person?" Reflecting on her arrest, Hale described the experience as humiliating, saying, "I spent the night on a mat on a concrete floor in deplorable conditions, while this woman, this squatter, slept in my home." She is uncertain when she will be able to return to her property, as she awaits a hearing for Johnson's appeal, despite Johnson not meeting the statutory requirements for one. Hale remains in a state of limbo, unsure of when she will regain access to her home, and continues to seek legal resolution to the situation.
Can you imagine you and I coming home from vacation and finding strangers inside our house, and the locks changed on the doors, and then we call the police and they come and arrest us because the other people were quote unquote legal squatters?
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It just infuriates me that things are so backwards in this country. And this article, it reminds me of what happened to your mom and dad in Oregon. The same thing happened, didn't it?
Not quite this extreme, but yeah, there were some squatters living on the other side of my neighbor's house, or our neighbor's house in Oregon. And they were dangerous. They would come and steal things out of the garages. And at the time, my mom was often alone for a week while my dad went up 3 hours away to take care of grandkids. So she'd be alone. She'd come home late at night and never knew if the house had been broken into, because there were these squatters just living, I don't know, in the forest, kind of on the other side of our neighbor's house. So
it reminds me of that verse in the Bible that talks about when good is considered bad and bad is considered good. Everything is 180 degrees out of phase, and the legal homeowner is considered a criminal. Mm-hmm. It's just terrible. We need to get that fixed.
Why would they take the part of the squatters instead of the people who legally participate in the community and pay taxes?
It's happening in blue cities and blue states across the country. Georgia is not a blue state, but where that was at, it's run by Democrats, and so basically they're against the bourgeois evil landlords. Okay, and so they pass these crazy laws to protect the tenants, but they just went way too far with it, and these people aren't even tenants, but they're still considered tenants.
They should be considered
they're
thieves.
Criminals. They're
thieves.
Criminals. I know what my grandpa would do.
Well, my grandpa had this problem too. He owned a bunch of properties out in Newport, and they had tenants who wouldn't pay, and there was just no recourse to deal with it. So
yeah, my grandpa would say, "Fire up the backhoe, dig me some holes." But of course,
I think mine was a gentler man.
Yeah, we would never. My grandpa was rough. My dad was rough.
My grandfather was gentle.
All right. Okay, that was the bad. Now let's get something good here, Sarah.
All right.
Talk to us about the Home Defense Show Hero of the Week, and it's related.
You guys are going to love this. This is a great story. Handyman finds clever way to remove squatters from mother's house. After squatters took over his mother's home, one handyman took the law into his own hands and uncovered a clever way to force them out. United Handyman Association founder Flash Shelton became a squatter himself. I dissected the laws over a weekend. I basically figured out that until there's civil action, the squatters didn't have any rights. So if I could switch places with them, become the squatter myself, I would assume those squatters' rights, Shelton said Thursday. After his father died, the family was trying to sell the home, but learned squatters had taken over the residence. Squatters are individuals who do not own or rent a property, but live there anyway. Upon calling law enforcement, Shelton learned there was little police could do. I called local law enforcement, and as soon as they saw that there was furniture in the house, they said that I had a squatter situation and that they had basically no jurisdiction and they couldn't do anything, he said. Shelton then decided that he could use squatters' rights to take back his home. As a precaution, he also had his mother write and notarize a lease. I packed up my Jeep, drove up there, and paced out the joint. Around 4 a.m., I waited. About 8:30 in the morning, 3 cars pulled out of the driveway, and I made entrance to the house. I put up cameras, waited for them to come back. They didn't have a lease, so that never came into play. But when they came back, I just laid it out for them. I told them that it was all locked up, cameras, and the only way they would get back in the house is if they broke in on camera, and I would prosecute. I told them they had a day to get their stuff out or the furniture was not theirs anymore. In New York, squatters are granted rights after just 30 days, which makes it harder to evict. It's a similar story in Los Angeles, where landlords are often forced to pay just to get rid of tenants who fail to pay. And in Philadelphia, even after court orders a person out of a home, sheriffs might show up to evict, but end up leaving rather than cause a confrontation. The laws are written to protect the tenant, not the landlord, Rochelle told Fox News Digital in June. The local laws that protect tenants at the expense of landlords have fueled this phenomenon because we've basically said forever it's the landlord's fault, not the tenant's fault, if the tenant can't pay rent. He further warned landlords, the law is not on your side. Shelton experienced this firsthand. The law would prevent me from physically removing them, he said. However, being that I wasn't the homeowner, I had more rights. As a tenant, I would actually have more rights than them. He added that if the squatters were still at the home and did not leave, he would have relied on his lease and tried to make it miserable for them so they would exit on their own. Having solved his own squatters' problems, Shelton is now helping others in a similar circumstance and calling to make squatting illegal. I do Zoom consultations, I ask people to make a donation to the cause, and when I can physically go out and help them, then yes, it is. It is something I am doing to help people now, as many as I possibly can. More importantly to that is I am trying to change the laws. This is my number one focus. So in helping others right now, since I feel bad I can't help everyone, but if we can change the squatters' laws, I feel like that's the way I can help everyone.
Well, that's a different kind of hero, isn't it?
Yeah. Creative solution to a messy problem.
Well, it's kind of like fighting fire with fire, right?
Yeah.
But it's ingenious. I mean, going in and living with them, that takes a lot of guts, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't know what these people are like. They could be axe murderers for all you know, but this guy's not afraid. He goes in there. That's a lot of time, too. I mean, because he may have to live there for several days before they'll leave. Mm-hmm. But it works, and it's a heck of a lot faster than dragging it out in court, 3-6 months at a time. Isn't it amazing what you can make a living at these days? Basically what he does is he squats the squatters until they can't take him anymore. So, I don't know.
Wonder what he does.
You could get the squatters to leave just by being obnoxious. Maybe I should do that. I've been called obnoxious before. Well, if any of you out there have someone squatting in your home and you need an obnoxious person, I can do that. All right. So you just give me a call. All right. Well, hey, that was good news, and that was our Flash Shelton. You are our hero of the week. Sarah, what's coming up next on the show?
Next, we're talking to John Riley, the lead instructor at Gentle Response, all about how to de-escalate verbal confrontations. Then, in the shootingclasses.com self-defense report, we'll be speaking with firearms instructor Rod Yoder about convenience store robberies by teenagers.
All right, you guys are going to love John Riley from Gentle Response. But in the meantime, God bless and stay safe, because we will be right back.
Firearms training should be easy. Instructors can focus on teaching and not worry about all the complex paperwork and management behind the scenes. Just pull the trigger and let us do the administrative work. Welcome to shootingclasses.com.
At Center Shot Gun Range, we are passionate about training. Don't know where to start? We offer a 1-hour new shooter seminar to introduce you to the world of firearms and help you find training opportunities specific to you. Concealed carry, home defense, firearm safety, AR-15, private one-on-one training, custom training, or maybe you're on a security team looking to protect your church or business. We even offer weekday morning and evening classes. Center Shot Gun Range has you covered. Start your journey at centershotgunrange.com.
Firearms training should be easy. Instructors can focus on teaching and not worry about all the complex paperwork and management behind the scenes. Just pull the trigger and let us do the administrative work. Welcome to shootingclasses.com.
They say he eats crayons and his knuckles drag on the ground, but that's only half true. Welcome back to the Home Defense Show with Skip Coryell.
And that was the beautiful and sultry voice of Golden Glenn, the official announcer of the Home Defense Show. Folks, we live in a dangerous world, and I want you to be able to protect and defend the ones you love. And that's why I have this show. It's my way of empowering you to accomplish one of your primary jobs in life. You are a protector and a defender. All right, listeners, before we get too far into the show, don't forget to check out our sponsors, United States Concealed Carry Association, shootingclasses.com, and Center Shot Indoor Gun Range for all your training and equipment needs. Without our sponsors, this show wouldn't be on the air, so we thank you all. And now I'd like to welcome John Riley from Gentle Response. John, welcome to the Home Defense Show.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here, Skip.
Well, and thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. John, I think you and I have known each other from a distance for quite a few years now. We pass each other like in conferences and things like that. And I think maybe we've talked once or twice, but I don't really know you personally. And I'd like to change that today.
Okay, let's make it happen. You're right. We've passed each other at the Larry Jackson Church Security Conference a couple times through the years, but have never had an opportunity to just sit down and chat with you. So yeah, let's change that.
All right. Well, you know, one of the problems is when we go to these events, it's like everything is hectic. It's going at light speed, and everyone is wanting to talk to you. So it's hard to break away and just sit down and have a cup of coffee. So, you know, we'll talk now, but I think sometime in the future, we should have lunch, and I'm willing to buy.
Okay, you're on.
All right. You know, it's like that Jerry Maguire movie. You had me at hello. All right.
There you go. That's right.
All right. Well, John, tell me about Gentle Response, your company.
Yeah, this was born out of a calling, literally a calling in 2016. I'd retired from the Grand Rapids Police Department after 20 years in 2015. Was well on my way into another career as a charter pilot. I had got my pilot's license when I was in high school. So I was focused on finally doing something aviation related. And I was asked to do a de-escalation class for the church security team here at my church here at Resurrection Life here in Granville. And it was while putting the class together, I just felt that I literally had a road to Damascus experience because I absolutely pivoted. I just knew that I knew and had such a calling to stop what I was doing in regards to aviation and put together a informational / training program to help church staff and volunteers more effectively handle some of the stressful confrontational situations they encounter. And I felt led to Proverbs 15:1 for a business name. And I could not find a translation that resonated with me. A soft tone turns away wrath. You know, you're familiar with, there's several different versions of it. And it wasn't until I found the Message translation, a gentle response diffuses anger. And I said, Lord, thank you. There's my business name right there, a gentle response, because I have seen that happen. And here I am, 6, 7, 8 years later, my team and I travel the country. Not only do I work with churches, but businesses and state agencies, educational, medical, law enforcement. It's been a blessing. And then I put together some books, and people are buying them. And all of a sudden, I got an email from the one and only Skip Coryell saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you." Here I am.
Well, your fame precedes you, John.
Right.
Well, you know, I like that name, Gentle Response. You know, I've always liked that name because one of the things that I teach my students is, you know, one of the most important tools of self-defense is a kind word. It just seems to, when you're kind to someone, you know, if they're a sane, rational person, they tend to want to de-escalate. But you know, talk about the importance of de-escalation. You know, why bother to de-escalate? You know, 'cause, you know, you can take the opposite point of view and say, well, yeah, but violence is a very effective conflict management tool. You know,
Yeah.
and it is, but why is de-escalation better?
Well, from a practical standpoint, it reduces you getting hurt. It reduces paperwork, and
Yeah.
it just reduces long-term drama, court. I mean, there's so many practical things, but generally, one of the biggest ones is as I was getting older, not only as a police officer, but just getting older in life. There's this saying, I'm just getting too old for this, and you just get to realize that it's easier to get hurt and it takes longer to heal. And if you can avoid all that, why not? And granted, there are people out there that are very assertive. There are some people that absolutely do not appreciate being disrespected or talked to in a certain tone of voice. And you know what? More power to you. But I'm just telling you from my own experience, you can reduce a lot of stress and drama in your life if you can develop the self-discipline to just walk away and let it go, because there is no law, rule, regulation, policy that says that you will, you shall, you must react and respond to every knucklehead who calls you a name or
Yeah.
flips you the bird or does anything. You know, you don't have to. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of situations of good people meaning well, especially in the capacity of church safety security or just really across the board. People meaning well, but because they don't know what they don't know, or they just don't have the conditioning or stress inoculation to deal with a stressful confrontational situation or just dealing with stress, period, they have a tendency to overreact. And then they end up on the internet or in jail or worse, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get people, Skip, to just slow down and really assess that situation. Does it really require you being a jerk in handling this situation or whatever? Does it really require you responding to it, or can you just let it go? Should you let it go? You know, just trying to get people to slow down and really take a moment to try to think it through.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I agree with you. One of the things that I've noticed personally in the last 5 years, you know, since COVID, all right, everyone seems to be all jacked up already. It's like, you know, they're like a pressure cooker, and you got the little jiggly thing on the pressure relief valve on top, right? Everyone is at full steam, and it doesn't take as much to offend people today, rather than 5, 10, 15 years ago. It just seems like everybody is on edge these days,
Yes.
and they're set off just more easily.
Yes, and unfortunately, in my humble opinion, based on what I've seen and all that, social media has a large part to do with that. The stuff that people are seeing keeps their adrenaline dump at a certain level because they're seeing things that offend them, that anger them, that frustrate them, and then at the same time they see behavior that almost seems to glorify it. And so that's why you have these pranksters and idiots going around creating confrontational situations to get more likes on social media. And so it's just this ugly, ugly spiraling situation. But yes, ever since COVID, I totally agree with you. And it's unfortunate. And I don't know how or when it's going to get any better anytime soon, just because of the stuff that people are exposed to, which kind of goes back to why I strongly emphasize to good Christian believing people, folks, you've really got to make an effort to develop this ministry mindset and slow down and recognize that even though that knucklehead is being a knucklehead, that's still a child of God, and you don't have to react and respond. You can walk away.
Yeah, that reminds me, you know, of a movie. It was a TV series that was way back in like the I don't know, late 60s, early 70s, with David Carradine, called Kung Fu. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yes, sir. Yeah.
You know, Kwai Chang train, or
Yes.
whatever his
Yeah.
cane. It was always the same way. You know, he'd go into a town, and you know the townspeople would tease him. They'd call him names. They'd abuse him. All this stuff, and he would always say, I have no wish to fight you, right?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
as like a 14-year-old kid, I only watched that show because I knew in the last 15 minutes of the movie he was going to kick everybody's butt, right?
That's right.
And
That's right.
it's like I could have watched the last 15 minutes of every 1 hour show and I would have gotten, my adrenaline junkie fix for the week.
Yep. Yep.
But one question that I wanted to ask you is, okay, de-escalation. Are there some people that are more difficult to de-escalate than others?
Yes, and generally it goes back to their own character, personal makeup. There are people who feel like they have to win. They have to have the last word because they will just feel like they are a lesser of a person if they're not the one who's in charge, in control, or has the last word. When you're trying to get one of those people to try to settle down and take a moment and all that, it can be very challenging. It can be very, very challenging also when you're dealing with someone who's highly intoxicated. Drunks, alcohol or drugs or a combination of both. It can be challenging to deal with someone with mental illnesses and challenges. It can be very challenging when you're dealing with someone who has an agenda, who's specifically trying to create some type of confrontation, or just they have an agenda to be demonstrating at the church or at your place of business. It can be very challenging, but I'm telling you from personal experience, it can be done. But it goes back to you having this self-discipline to not allow yourself to become overly frustrated, impatient, or offended, because that only increases the likelihood you're going to end up being the one to say or do something that escalates that situation. And a part of that is having that situational awareness of recognizing, okay, this person is really pushing my buttons today, and then the self-discipline to do an about face and walk away. If you can. Granted, there are going to be situations where you're it, in which case you've really got to bear down and pull out that professionalism and self-discipline to avoid saying you're doing something to escalate it.
As a police officer, that's something that cops have to deal with like every single day. You talk about, people who are intoxicated or they're on drugs or they're mentally ill. Gosh, you were with Grand Rapids Police Department. I mean, you
Yes.
go downtown on South Division, that's what you're going to run into, and that's what you're going to have to deal with every day. How do you reason with an unreasonable person who's not in their right mind?
Yes, and again, it's very, very challenging, but it can be done. On one hand, and again, it kind of goes back to my comment about not letting yourself become overly impatient. We know that alcohol, we'll talk about drunks as an example. We know that alcohol affects the human brain, the ability to rationalize, the ability to think. But then we become impatient when we're dealing with the drunk. You've got to give them time to rationalize, to process what it is that you're saying you're doing. Now, there will be times when you don't have the luxury of giving them time to process. I need things to happen. I need them to happen now. I need you to move or whatever. That is why, again, it goes back to my comment about slow down and assess the situation. Is there really some significant urgency to get this person to do something or move or whatever, or can you just address them? Maybe it's a drunk who's lying on someone's private property, and you're just trying to talk them into walking off the property and moving on down the road on their own. Can you at least just give them a few extra moments to just process and come to the understanding, okay, I just need to move. It just takes time. Sometimes you may run out of time. It depends on the situations. But I see too many examples on YouTube and social media and so on of people getting way too impatient, way too frustrated, way too soon. And one tragic example in Colorado about 2 years ago, deputies were so impatient with having a driver step out of the car, they ended up shooting and killing him. And it was a young college student. He ran off the road. He called 911. He said, I need help. He made some comments to the dispatcher that I'm hearing voices, I'm seeing shadows. So they immediately had an indication that there was some type of mental illness involved. The dispatcher relays that to the responding deputies. And when you watch the body cam video, within moments of arriving, without taking into consideration, we have a young man who's hearing voices, is scared, and he's telling people, look, I'm scared. I just want my car pulled out of the ditch. The deputy is very, very aggressively yelling at this young man to get out of the car. And the guy is simply saying very calmly, sir, I'm scared. I don't know why you want me to step out. Can you just help me? Can you just help me? Within moments, and the whole thing lasted about an hour and a half, there was about 20 deputies and officers, and they were so focused on getting this kid out of the car when there was no reason to. They went down this this rabbit hole. They developed their own tunnel vision, and they decided to force him out. And they shattered a window, and when he reacted aggressively, defensively, an officer who decided to stand on the hood pointing a gun at him just lit the kid up. Wow. And now that officer and 2 other officers are now facing criminal charges. One just got convicted, and now there's a thing called duty to intervene, where police officers are going to be hit in the blast zone when they allow one of their colleagues, do something crazy. And so I share that just to say, when you allow yourself to become so impatient and so frustrated, you develop your own tunnel vision, and you have blinders on, and you don't think outside the box. And there was absolutely no urgency or any really good reason to have this kid step out of the car. All they had to do is use their bumper. He was not a suspect in anything. There was no alleged crime to have been committed. All they had to do was use the bumper on the cruiser and push him out. And we'd be on, and the chances are very good he would have been compliant and cooperative after he was out of the ditch. But, when you have someone telling you that they see shadows and they're afraid, and you jump on the hood of their car, you're silhouetted by your spotlights, you're feeding into that fear that this individual who's very probably suffering from mental illness, you're not helping this situation. And that's what can happen when you become frustrated, impatient, even offended. You say and do things that escalate a situation. So all that just to say, folks, slow down, assess the situation before you just go blasting in there and end up being the one to say or do something to escalate it.
So let me give you an example then, John. Let's say, you're working church security, you're out there in the foyer, a man walks in, he looks suspicious to you for whatever reason. Is it okay to just hang back for 5-10 seconds and watch, gather intel before you approach the guy and talk to him?
Yes, and I will give you a great example of why, because my friend just told me this happened a couple Sundays ago at his church. He was told of some people probably making out in the back of the balcony, right in the dimly lit area. So he goes up there to check it out. He actually sees 2 men. Now, they're not making out, but they just a lot of inappropriate touching, public display of affection. And he says, John, it wasn't even the fact that it was 2 men. It just, even if it was a male, female, it just would have been inappropriate for the church setting.
Right.
As he's watching them, he notices that they're also looking around and texting. And he's a retired cop too. And he started thinking, you know what? This could be a setup. And so he held back and didn't engage with them. And finally service is over and they left. And so we were talking about, okay, what happens if they come back? Well, his thought was, maybe I can go up there and sit next to them. Maybe my presence or the presence of one of my people might make them uncomfortable and they will stop what they're doing or even leave. And I said, that's great, but consider this. If they're looking for some type of contact, what are you going to do if they now really become inappropriate with you sitting there? Now what?
Yeah.
Okay, because now you may feel like you have to do something. All right, so because he held back and continued to observe, he noticed, wait a minute, this could be a setup. So always be aware that there may be people who will come into your church with, and this goes to my point of where it can be very challenging when you're dealing with people with an agenda. So be very, very careful. Look around to see if they have a buddy or someone or something with the camera waiting for some type of interaction and all that. And then consider, do I have to make contact with them? Let's say it gets inappropriate anyway, and you do feel, okay, I do need to say something. All right, go up there, but make sure you think things through. Think about your approach. Think about what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and make sure you have an exit plan. Recognize there may come a point where I just need to break contact, disengage, and walk away because they are clearly trying to suck me down this rabbit hole. In the state of Michigan, as it is in a lot of states, it is against the law to interfere, disrupt, or create a disturbance in a religious ceremony, event, and so on. Call 911 and get them coming, get them rolling. It's better to have the po-po 30 seconds out than 3 minutes out, trust me. And so if you can get these the subjects to de-escalate, leave on their own, or whatever, I'd rather you disregard the police as they come rolling in there, give them an extra coffee and a donut, than to now call them and people are getting hurt, things are getting broken. So yes, Skip, back to your question. Yes, I highly encourage you to slow down, just step back and observe, and maybe what initially caught your attention has an innocent explanation, and you don't have to inadvertently escalate situations, which I have seen happen.
Great. All right. Well, John, we had a great time with you, but we're almost out of time here now.
But we just got started.
I know. We could go on for an hour. You're going to be at the Larry Jackson Berry County Church Safety Summit.
Yes.
Was that February 22nd, I believe.
Yeah.
What are you going to be talking about at the conference?
That you have a God-given ACE card, ACE, your appearance, communication, and engagement. And all three of those concepts and components play very effectively to de-escalate a situation. And I'm going to remind people to develop that ministry mindset. And I am going to emphasize to people to slow down and assess the situation and think it through.
All right. That sounds like good advice. All right. General Response. Where can people go on the internet to find out more about General Response?
Yep, gentle-response.com. I'm also on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. I'm there. I've got 2 books. A Gentle Response, Conflict De-Escalation with a Ministry Mindset. And I also have a book specifically for law enforcement, Practical De-Escalation for Patrol. I'm everywhere. From what I understand, just typing in Gentle Response Training will put me, I'll pop up either on the first page or second page.
All right. That sounds fantastic. All right, John, I look forward to buying you lunch or dinner or whatever. So we will have to get to know each other better. But I really appreciate you coming on the show today, and I'll see you February 22nd at the Larry Jackson Berry County Church Safety Conference in Middleville, Michigan. Thank you very much for being on Home Defense Show today, John.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.
All righty. All right, folks, this is Skip Coryell on Home Defense Show. Coming up next, we'll get some expert advice on the details of self-defense in our shootingclasses.com self-defense report with firearms instructor Rod Yoder from the great state of Ohio. All right, folks, during the break, I want you to log into rumble.com and search on the Home Defense Show. I've posted a short and educational video there just for you named The Fat Man Inside Me. I've got other educational and funny videos there as well, so check them out. God bless and stay safe, because we will be right back.
Avoid danger, save lives, and keep your loved ones safe. If this sounds good to you, you sound good to me. And I'd like to help you do those things. Avoid danger, save lives, and keep your loved ones safe. If you're looking for more excitement in your life, we have nothing to offer you. But if you are a thoughtful, responsible, nonviolent man or woman, we'd love to teach you what to do if something crazy happens. More importantly, we'd like to teach you what not to do. We currently have over 500,000 members. They are doctors and single moms and firemen and grandmothers and veterans and Democrats and Republicans and members of every faith. But the one thing they all have in common is that they know exactly what to do if something crazy happens. When you're with one of our members, you are safe. Our members know how to de-escalate situations. They know how to calm things down. We are the United States Concealed Carry Association. See what we're all about at usconcealedcarry.com.
Discover the little-known backstory of the U.S. Concealed Carry Association at usconcealedcarry.com.
He's no Einstein, but he can read and write and feed himself just like a big boy. Welcome back to the Home Defense Show with Skip Coryell.
And that was the beautiful and sultry voice of Golden Glenn, the official announcer of the Home Defense Show. And I'm your host, Skip Coryell. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, United States Concealed Carry Association, shootingclasses.com, and Center Shot Indoor Gun Range for all your training and equipment needs. And now it's time for our weekly self-defense report, sponsored by shootingclasses.com. And today we're speaking with Ohio firearms instructor Rod Yoder. So, Rod, welcome back to the Home Defense Show.
Thank you, Skip. I'm glad to be here with you today. Thanks.
How are things in Ohio?
Well, right now they're pretty snowy and cold, but this is also January in Ohio, so that's what you sign up for when you live here.
Oh, and you're south of me. So
yeah, we're south a little bit. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's usually not too bad. There's usually like a 5-degree differential between Ohio and Michigan. But hey, you're right. If we wanted, I suppose we could move to Florida. I just don't want to.
No.
All right. Before we get too far, tell us where you train, Rod.
We're actually in East Ohio. We're just south of Canton, Ohio, about 30 mile. And so we cover pretty much a good part of Northeast Ohio, Southeast Ohio.
All right. Here comes the article, the crime, so to speak. I'm going to read that off to you, and then you and I are going to hit it back and forth and just analyze it for everyone. So here we go. In a recent incident that has sparked considerable debate, a New Orleans convenience store clerk fatally shot a 16-year-old armed robber during an attempted robbery. The event unfolded when two armed individuals entered the store demanding cash. Surveillance footage captured 16-year-old Cecil Batiste pointing a gun with an extended magazine at the clerk working at the cell phone counter of Sam's Meat Market. As the situation escalated, Batiste was seen stuffing cash and other items into his pockets. The other suspect, 18-year-old Tioni Juarez, was wearing a black ski mask. As the suspects attempted to leave the store, the clerk retrieved a firearm and discharged it, striking Batiste in the abdomen, causing him to collapse. The surveillance video further showed the clerk stepping out of camera view, only to return moments later and fire additional shots at Batiste as he lay on the store floor. Batiste succumbed to his injuries later at the hospital. Juarez, in the midst of the chaos, returned fire and sustained an injury to his right forearm while fleeing the scene. An unidentified woman transported Juarez to a hospital where he was treated and subsequently arrested. Juarez faces multiple charges, including armed robbery, aggravated battery, and illegal use of a weapon, with his bond set at $170,000. The store clerk has not been charged, and Loyola law professor Dane Ciolini expressed skepticism about the likelihood of charges being filed. Quote, that clerk was in an obviously high-stress situation and saw the perpetrator still moving with a gun, and it's hard to second-guess his decision to use deadly force yet again, unquote. Ciolino also clarified that under Louisiana law, Juarez cannot be charged for Batiste's death, as the fatal act was committed by the victim, not a co-felon. All right. Well, that is a bit of a mess there. Lots of action. So what are your initial thoughts on all of that, Rod?
Well, first of all, we had a juvenile, a 16-year-old juvenile with a gun, which is illegal. We had an 18-year-old with a gun, which is illegal, coming into a convenience store. That happens a lot. It seems like those convenience stores tend to be magnets for this kind of robbery and bad behavior. So, first of all, not surprised what happened here, that they came in with a firearms. One gentleman, as I said in the article, had a ski mask. So we kind of knew what was going to happen when they came in the store.
Yeah. Yeah, we always call them stop and robs.
Yeah.
I was watching the video, and I know you did too. The video shows a lot more as far as timing and distance and all of that. This struck me as incredibly brazen. He walked up there with that extended magazine, and it looked like about a 30-round magazine on a Glock, and he just walked right up there. And you know how we make fun of people that hold the gun sideways like that?
Yeah.
That's what he was doing, and he like tapped the counter to get the guy's attention. It's like the clerk didn't even realize he was there until he was right on top of him.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's the thing that we always talk about in our classes. I'm sure you do as well. is being aware of your surroundings. I think that guy was like a phone salesman, or because he was at the phone counter, so he was selling these cell phones and all the accessories. And that kid, well, both kids were in the store a little while before he even saw that they were there,
Yeah,
until he
yeah.
approached them with a gun. Because he looked up from his own phone and said, like, "What are you doing? What are you doing there?"
Yeah, and then it was like a reaction. He reached out his left hand to bat the gun away when he first saw it. So he was totally surprised. But then, he went into compliance mode, and at that point, we don't even know that he's armed, that he has a gun. And so he just kind of complied. Boy, it must have been for, I don't know, 20, 25 seconds that it was going on. But then as the guy's walking away and he's over there by his buddy, he pulled out his gun and he the clerk pulled out his gun, racked around into the chamber, and then was firing one-handed. What struck you in the actual gunfight?
The first thing I noticed is he really wasn't even he was just pointing the gun.
Yeah.
He got the gun out, and like you said, he kind of waited for his moment. And he had several moments before he actually pulled the gun out. And as you say, he did have to rack one in the chamber, but basically he just pointed the gun in the general direction. Typically, we see in these kind of gunfights, marksmanship is not a thing.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. They just put the gun out there and they start spraying bullets.
Yeah, well, people get excited.
They do. I was surprised that really he shot the guy as much as he did, because he was just put the gun out there, kind of pointing down, and just started pulling the trigger. And then the other guy, I think he fired at the clerk. Then the clerk pointed the gun in his direction, and started working on him then.
I always teach my students, take that extra half a second to get a two-handed grip, because you're going to shoot just a lot more accurately and faster, because you'll have better recoil management. But Rod, what is your opinion on carrying with an empty chamber? Because I know everybody, thinks a little bit different on that.
I don't think it's a very good idea, because this clerk kind of just proved that he had to wait for his moment and then rack the slide to get one in. And what if he would have been, had something in his hand, or maybe had to open the door or close the door, or whatever else with his other hand? You're not going to be able to do that. Some of my students, they get nervous about that. I always say, carry the gun around the house unloaded.
Yeah.
And then do that loaded, but with nothing in the chamber. And then finally grow up to have the gun loaded around the house, but then rack one in the chamber, and you'll see that nothing's going to happen. So yes. I think that's more of a danger, not having one in the chamber, than actually doing it, with one in the chamber.
Yeah. Rod, I agree with you. I have pretty much the same mindset. And for this particular store clerk, boy, it really limited his options, because like you said, there were probably 3 times prior to when he shot where, the bad guy actually turned away and pointed the gun in the opposite direction. He had like 4 seconds where he could have, just draw his gun and fired. But I think he waited because he knew he had to rack around into the chamber.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of my students, it's like they feel uncomfortable with a gun. They don't trust themselves to operate the gun safely. So they want that extra measure of safety simply because they don't trust, themselves with the gun. But I think your advice is great advice, because what they need to create good muscle memory and confidence that the gun's not going to go off on its own just by being, in your holster. So I think that's really good advice, Rod.
Yeah. Many students really have that anxiety about having one in the chamber. I think that's a good way to get past that.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other thoughts on this particular scenario before we close it up?
The only thing that I noticed was when the clerk went out of the camera view and then came back in, and I think he shot another 2 rounds
Oh, yeah.
at the guy, but the guy was still moving. I think that could have been questioned. He was on the ground, but the guy was still moving around a little bit. Now, when he shot those last 2 rounds, he did have a good two-handed grip, and he used his sights.
Yeah, those were aimed shots. I had the same thought enter my mind. Probably because I'm from Michigan, which is more of a purple state as far as gun rights go. In New Orleans and Texas, those kinds of places, I think is probably just fine. But when you get in more of a purple political state, those kinds of things are judged a little more severely. So in Michigan, he probably, especially in the Detroit area, probably would have been charged with that. What about in the Ohio area?
Well, I think we might be a little more lenient than that. But still, you have to be able to articulate, number one, why you started to shoot, and number two, why you stopped to shoot.
Yeah.
I always tell my students, and I learned this from other instructors, articulate basically, I shot until I recognized the threat was gone. Yeah. Once I recognized the threat was gone, I stopped shooting.
Yep.
And I think if you put it in those terms, it's kind of hard to pick that apart.
Yeah. And get a good lawyer after that.
Get a good lawyer, yes.
All right. Hey, Rod, thanks for the analysis. It was great. Before you go, will you please tell people how they can get a hold of you to get training?
You can get a hold of us through shootingclasses.com and also the USCCA website. But if you go to shootingclasses.com/McFadden Firearms, and you can see all of our class offerings on the shootingclasses.com webpage.
All right. Awesome. Well, Rod, thank you very much for being on the Home Defense Show today.
Thank you for having me, Skip. I really enjoyed it.
All right, folks, this is Skip Coryell on Home Defense Show, and that about wraps it up for this week's show. I've had a good time, and I hope you have too. Please don't forget to thank our sponsors, Center Shot Indoor Gun Range at centershotgunrange.com, shootingclasses.com to help you find the right trainer for your needs, and the United States Concealed Carry Association. For all your self-defense needs, go to uscca.com. All right, I've written 20-plus books, and they're all available on Amazon.com in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. This week, check out my book, Stalking Natalie. It's a novel about a serial killer, and I know you'll love it. And if you want training from me in person, then check out Midwest Tactical Training at shootingclasses.com. Please join us again next week for all your home defense needs. In the meantime, God bless and stay safe.
Thank you for joining us this week on The Home Defense Show. Now, get out there and protect the ones you love. We'll see you next week with more of the best.
Bye-bye, boys!
Have fun storming the castle!